if you're acting in a way that is not really you, right, and it seems incongruent, then that's what kills the trust. It's not so much what you do, right, but is it congruent to who you are? All right. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Art of E-commerce. We've got my man Tony, our co-host, and today we're talking all about sales when it comes to your agency, your e-commerce agency, when it comes to really any business, e-commerce as well. We're going to talk about a bunch about pricing, right? Which is a really, really cool topic, a very important one as well. Both sales and pricing is just like one of those things that at the end of the day, if you don't get right, it's really, really hard to get to be successful with your business and to actually scale the business, right? A lot of it comes down to having limiting beliefs around pricing. When it comes to sales, a lot of people are scared of it, or maybe they've been misguided and are maybe way too salesy, or they just don't come across in the right way. So I'm excited to dig into this, man.
Me too, bro. Honestly, I think we were having a convo earlier today about this topic generally, and I think there's a lot to bring, and there's a lot of nuance to it too. But I mean, just to start off, sales generally is one of those things that like it's always gonna serve you well in life.
Yeah.
Right. And if you think about it, you could even say life in general is about knowing how to sell yourself. Right? Like knowing how to, even for like people going into a 9-to-5, like knowing how to pitch yourself as the best person for the job, or like in an entrepreneurship environment, selling your service or product, like being able to pitch yourself as the best fit to solve the prospect's worry, right? So it's really something that can be encompassed for literally everything.
Yeah, it's one of those skills that once once you get it right, everything just becomes so much easier. Now, it's not easy to get it right, and that's why we're shooting this podcast. But also, it really just opens up so many doors and just makes the whole process much, much easier. It was only really when I cracked the sales component, as well as obviously when you can match it, with the incredible service, incredible product, then that's really when you hit breakthrough, right? If you got sales but no product behind it, then it's tough, right? But when you have both components, it becomes business in general just becomes so freaking easy.
100%. And I mean, the thing to address right off the bat, the elephant in the room, right, is the fact that like some people might think of sales and be like, oh, that's like manipulation, that's like ripping someone off, the sleazy sales guy, these kinds of things. When you hear those kinds of reactions, like what comes to mind?
It's just like it does get a bad rep. I think a lot of it is well founded, simply because there are a lot of people who are who use this old sales tactics. And here's the thing, right? There are certain products and for certain, especially for certain price points, that those type of sales tactics may work, right? I do think there's a lot of resistance to them at this point. I think everyone really, it's kind of like the oldest method in the book. Like everyone has heard of it, But I feel like once you get to a point where you're looking for those bigger sales, like for example, if you've got an agency and you're looking to sign clients, those tactics are not going to help you. Like they're not going to work for you, right? Because it's all about building rapport. It's all about building trust. Because if you're selling anything that has longevity to it, right? You not only want to sell this person on your service, but you want to sell them on the partnership, right? A lot of people that use these sales tactics that are very aggressive, or that are they use the oldest method in the book. It's a one-time purchase. That product, that person is going to buy the product and boom, they're never going to see them again, right? But if you get someone through the door with those sleazy tactics, and you're running a service-based business like an agency, or you're running an e-com brand and you want those repeat purchases, you're not thinking long-term, because that's not really going to serve you, right? In building that relationship where you can have this client for 12, 14, 18 months, right? And really build a widely successful business.
Yeah. I mean, in the end of the day, there's always going to be the bad apples that ruin the batch, right? And there's always going to be people who give the impression of, I wouldn't even call it a profession in the sense of entrepreneurship, because it's just part of the package of what you're doing, regardless of the service or product that you're going into, right? But there are certain things that you can do and identify, like across selling generally, right? And one of the things that I've really come to realize over the last year is the fact that sometimes in movies or in just the fantasy portrayal of what sales is, there's a lot of talking involved, and there's a lot of pushing and guiding people along your thought pattern, right? But what I've come to realize is that it's more about the questions you're asking and the things you're revealing about the prospect that make the bigger difference in the end.
100%. I think that that applies for life in general. One of the best traits that I look for in a person is, or can these people generally listen and ask genuine questions, like questions that investigate, right? That do like genuine investigation and inquiring about this person, and do they generally seem interested, right? 100%. I know people have spoken about this concept before, and it's kind of this doctor mindset, right, where you're diagnosing the problem. Really, with my sales, to give people a bit of an idea, especially for my agency and when I'm signing big clients, I'm very laid back about it. Like, the main thing is understanding where their business is currently at, because and then if I am doing the talking, right, is because I'm pumped, because I'm talking to them about some of the strategies they can implement and adding a lot of value to them, and maybe using a bit of a sort of flex approach, obviously getting them to understand that, like, I know my shit, right? And it's a matter of like, are you ready for the service? Because the service works, right? The approach works, but it's understanding like whether they're ready for the service, right? And that's how I frame things. It's not about like, as you mentioned, like there's not a lot of talking done. There's not a lot of like, talking about X, Y, Z, right? It's all about listening carefully, right? And being able to understand what they truly need. That's one thing that people don't, that I think they mess up in sales, is like they offer something that the prospect doesn't really need, right? Straight out the bat, the prospect jumps on a call and they have this like cool looking presentation describing their service and how they work. No, like that's not what the prospect wants, right? Most people, I'm not saying you have to have a tailored solution, but just understand where they're currently at, what they actually need, and then even if you have a service that it's one for all, right? Then at least you can frame it in a way that benefits them, right? Like if you have a that product that you're selling or that service that you're selling, even if it's for a broad audience, you can frame it in a way that specifically suits their needs, right? And that's the fun thing about sales, the fact that different people will see different value in that product or service, and the key is to understand what is the one thing that they're looking to get out of that. Because once you can hit that chord, then that sale is very easy, because at the end of the day, it's just finding a win-win. Like you want this, I want this, right? And when you do that, it becomes very, very easy.
And that's a massive point as well. The fact that like you can be selling two people the same service, but framing it in completely different ways so as to actually target what it is that they want, right? Because they're both going to be in different starting points, and their desired end goal might look the same superficially, but deep down they're going to be thinking of it differently, right? And to bridge that gap, you're going to have to speak about different sides to your own offer to be 100%. Able to get there.
That's why we're not big fans of scripts, right? Like when we do sales, like I don't use a script, like and the way I teach it to my mentees as well is like, obviously there's a clear structure, right? There's certain transitions that you can use, and there's certain words that you can use. Don't get me wrong, right? I think a script has value, but once you learn the structure and once you learn kind of like the path to the sale, get rid of it. Like like one of the things that a script does, and just having this very like rigid structure to the sale, is that it really limits you, right? It makes you into a robot, because now you're having to stick to this winning script, right? And it really limits your human component. And unfortunately, that's the reason why most people will lose a lot of the initial sales. And that's one of the reasons why I lost, a lot of the initial sales that I had for my agency, which is normal, obviously, right? You're not gonna, some will, but you're not gonna be closing all the initial sales that you get. But a lot of it comes down to like, you being way too stuck to a script or a certain pattern of doing things.
And when it comes to script, there's also like, because there's kind of two sides to it, right? Like there's what you say and there's how you say it. And the how you say it's kind of like the style you go into it with, right? It's like you were saying, you like to be laid back. You're kind of like identifying the gaps, if I'm not mistaken, and then just like, seeing how you can bridge that, right? But like for someone starting out, how would you say like you can actually find the style that suits you.
So a little correction there. Like I think there's different phases to the call, right?
Okay.
Like I'm laid back when I'm asking questions, right? I'm laid back when I'm investigating, right? In the investigation phase of the call where I'm kind of learning about them, right? I'm pretty laid back. But once I'm talking about my service or my product, like I'm super pumped, and it's not like a fake hype, or excited. It's like I genuinely, care about this product I or this service, and I genuinely know this is great for you, right? And a lot of people, like, they tell me, like, dude, I really feel that energy coming from you. Like, I know, and I feel the confidence coming from you, right? You don't feel it if it's fake, by the way, right? So it's you cannot fake this stuff. Like, you generally have to be passionate about it, because otherwise it just comes off as very unnatural. But I think what comes down, it comes down to getting your style down. It comes down to to practice a lot of it. It's obviously looking at a lot of your sales goals and playing to your strengths as well. I feel like there's people who are great at hyping people up, right? And there's also great inquirers, right? There's people that are great at asking questions, and are very laid back. There are people who are introverts and people who are extroverts, right? And they can both have the same level of success. Like, this notion that introverts are not good at sales, absolutely not. I've bought high ticket programs or products, right? And they were sold by introverts, right? And they were like super laid back on the call. I'm like, yo, are you gonna like tell me about the product? Like, are you gonna speak about it? And they're like super chill about it, right? It's a complete different approach. So I think it's kind of understanding who you are as a person and not trying to be someone else. Like, I think the one thing that the one thing that makes people and prospects not confident and not trusting of you is not what you say, right? But it's the incongruence. So if you're acting in a way that is not really you, right, and it seems incongruent, then that's what kills the trust. It's not so much what you do, right, but is it congruent to who you are, right? Like, if you seem like an introvert, laid back person, are you trying to put on this mask and this character when you're not that person? If you are, then prospects are gonna be like, who really is this person, right? There's no, I don't know who they are, because there's no congruence in the way they act and the way they actually are.
And a lot of that has to do with actually like how are you going to portray the fact that you're passionate about this? Well, I mean, it helps to actually be passionate about what you're selling, right?
Yeah.
And to believe in the product or service you're doing, or else in the end of the day, you are literally just scamming them, right?
Yeah, of course. You have to be, you're the biggest hype man for your product. Like, you have to be the biggest believer in what you offer. That comes down to actually thinking about what your irresistible offer is and thinking about your customer.
And just another point on sales as well. Just wanted to make the note of, like, in the end of the day, you can read as many sales books as you want, and you can watch as many talks by Jordan Belfort and all these other guys. The only way you're going to get better is actually doing it yourself and looking at what you're doing wrong and diagnosing it and improving on it, right? And that's something I've really noticed, especially after the last couple months or so.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, right? Like, if you don't jump into it, you're not really gonna learn about sales. Like, it's but I'm sure you've noticed, right? Like, how drastic, like how exponential the growth can be when it comes to sales.
100%. Even just getting comfortable speaking to people on camera, like, I'm not an introverted guy. Like, I've always been comfortable speaking to people normally, but when you're put in a sales situation, at first, like, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing something that you're not used to. It's out of your comfort zone. But then you do it a few times, and if you're actually confident in what you're selling and you're, you genuinely think that by buying from you, this person is genuinely going to improve the circumstances of their life, that just makes things so much easier.
Yeah, I think that's so big, man. Like, people can tell from a mile away if you generally have their interest in mind. And sales is really like that. It's like thinking more about the person you've got in front of you than your own benefit. And I think even like business and life in general is like that, right? Like, every time you do something where you're thinking way too much about the benefit from it, like for your own sake, you always put out some whack shit because you're not thinking about the end user. I think, and kind of relating to what you said, like, I think another reason why people fail in sales is because maybe they jump on a call with a prospect, right? And this prospect is highly qualified, and they're already thinking about how much they're going to charge them and how it's going to change their life. Dude, that will actually be the biggest. That's the most detrimental thing you can do, right? Because now your head is not in the game. Now you're thinking way too much about what you're going to gain out of it instead of like what your client actually needs, right? And then you just mess up the call completely. But this applies for anything, right? Like even I use this podcast because we're just launching, right? But like if before starting this podcast, I had this master plan of how it's gonna bring in new customers and it's gonna make this much no, I literally have no projections. And I think that's like another thing that some entrepreneurs may find weird when it comes to my approach with things, is the fact that like I think you need to be calculated to an extent, but also not be ruled or be ruled by the ego and what you're looking to get out of it, because then you just miss the mark, instead of like focusing on what does the audience actually want. Is there space for a new podcast? Like, what are some of the topics that would help? Let's get feedback from like an early bird, a small group of people first, right? Like when you start thinking of the customer and you have the customer in mind from the very get-go, honestly, the business just takes care of you. It really does.
I mean, I think that's a good place to actually pivot to the pricing topic that we wanted to discuss, since you brought that up. Because, like you just said, you can go into a call with a prospect that, you're thinking about pricing and all these things and how it's going to change your life. But like, I'm sure going into your first sales call for the agency as well, you were thinking, am I actually worth this much? Can I actually price at this amount? Will I actually be able to deliver on this value? What are your thoughts on like especially the limiting beliefs when it comes to first starting out and pitching your service to a prospect?
So I think the main thing to understand is that these limiting beliefs are completely normal. I found very few people, if not any, who've gone from like not having money to being able to command those big prices. Like, and here's the thing, even from the get-go and even with the mentees, right? And the approach that I have got with the agency, like we think we make sure we have a really, really tight offer, make sure that the service delivery is on point. But even when you have all that on point, you have the team members already, right? Like it's still like hard to command those bigger prices, right? That's why it's a matter of like understanding that is normal. So that's why you want to get those initial wins under your belt, and that as you gradually start getting those wins under your belt, you'll start really seeing the value of what you can offer, right? So I think it's just understanding that in most cases it is completely normal, and the way to overcome it, the way I would recommend people especially who are in the agency space and are servicing e-com brands, is making a lot of the money on the percentage, because that is easier for your brain to conceptualize. Like that, if you charge like let's just say a fix, right? That is not huge, but then you charge a decent percentage. Like you're not really seeing the amount, so you don't have the limiting belief around the money because you haven't like charged a specific amount, but you've charged a percentage, and then as you start seeing the work that you do translate into money, then it really becomes much easier. So that's a way to bypass it with a performance like driven incentive. But I think it's just like a lot of it is just part of the game, really.
And I mean, the performance driven incentive is also a very big one, because with that, it's literally directly proportional to the amount of value that you're bringing to the client, right? So in that sense, you can totally justify the amount you're making there. And it's 100%. Not just some number you've plucked out of the air, right? Like it's completely based on what they're getting from your services.
100%. And that just makes it so much easier, really.
And what do you think in terms of like, so for example, I'm a agency owner starting out, and I see someone else who's starting out around the same time as me. And, we both signed our first client. We both pitched similar price. I see that they've signed a client for like twice the amount for their second client. And that I let that impact me. And I'm like, oh, am I worth the same as them? Am I really going to be able to deliver on that amount? How do you recommend actually approaching that and approaching comparisons? And
yeah, my take is I really don't give a shit what all, like I honestly especially at the start, you don't want to do this, right? You don't want to compare your pricing to anything else out in the market. And it may be kind of, contradictory to what a lot of people say, which is, you got to analyze the prices in the market and make a decision there. And obviously you have to be aware of kind of like what the prices look like, right? But I really don't care about price. Like, I don't compare my pricing to anything else in the market. Like, I know my pricing in many areas and in many of my businesses, they're way higher than most people, like way higher than the average. But I don't care about that, because at the end of the day, what you need to care about is what's your product? Like, your product may be your service, your product may be completely different to what other people are offering, right? The results that you offer may be completely different. The market that you go, that you market to may be completely different. Maybe you're going more niche. And so this notion that I really resonate with, that competition is for losers. I'm not competing, nor with a product, nor with a service, nor with pricing. I'm just like, in my lane, like, I've got a specific niche, right? And a specific product, and maybe is way better than what's out there, and I'm going to charge higher for it. And I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of people, and I was almost caught up in this, right? At the start, like, a lot of people make their pricing decisions based on who the top dog is in the space, right? And they're like, oh, I could never be like that, right? So clearly I'm just below that, right? So I'm going to try to gain the market share by dropping my prices. And I think that strategy is the worst, because people want to pay for good shit, right? And the people who cannot afford your services, they're not the right ones. Yeah. Like, you don't want to work with them. But trust me, if your shit's good, like, people want to pay for it. Like, there's a market for it. So understand that if you want to charge higher prices, if the top dog is like charging X, right? And you want to charge 2X, you guys are going for different markets. Maybe you have a complete different product. Just because there's a top dog in the space and they've been the top dog for like 10 years, right? It doesn't mean that you cannot charge more than them. Just approach it differently. Tap into a blue ocean, right? A space where maybe there's not as much competition, or maybe don't go after, this company's clients, right? Create your own lane, right? Maybe have a much better product. But I feel like a lot of people, even their product creation and their product development is literally determined by the competitor. They're like, oh, I want to charge less. Listen how messed up this is, right? Oh, since I'm going to charge less because I cannot be the top dog when it comes to pricing, because I don't have that authority, I'm going to create a lesser product. When you're putting out a product that's not better than 10 times better than what's out there already, you're already making a bad decision as an entrepreneur. Like, if you're putting out worse products out in the market just so that you can charge less, you literally have no reason to exist, and your business is not going to thrive. You may have like short-term success or gains, sure, but if you're already making that decision of like creating a worse product than what's out there, just by simple business nature, like, you're not going to succeed. So never make your product development or your product creation or service creation decision don't base it around pricing. Don't look at what the top dog is offering, because maybe they're in a complete different space. Find your own lane and find a way to either charge the same or charge higher.
And know the value that you're bringing as well, right? Because, as you said, if you're going in a slightly different direction, you're opening up to a new blue ocean, as you called it. Like, there's no base for comparison, like, there's no benchmark there. And as you said as well, like, if you're trying to come up with a product that is much better than anything else that's out there, which if you're not, in the end of the day, like, why not? Then why are you not at least going for it? Then, charging the price that you think warrants it, and listening to the market, which is another key thing, after you've released it, is a big part of that. Because there's no point in just whipping a price out of thin air and putting it out there, or like trying to undercut everybody just because you can catch the low-hanging fruit. Like, what's the point of that, right?
Yeah, they're really, like, you're also going to build a business that you're probably going to hate, because you're going to attract the wrong people. And I'm not saying that the people that cannot afford higher ticket services or anything like that are worse people, but just buying a lesser quality product just attracts lesser quality clients and customers, right? So 100%. I mean, not to get too personal here, right? But I also, the way I see my personal brand, it the exact same thing. Like, the way I see everything is the exact same thing. Like, when I started creating content, I would have placed myself in the digital marketing, social media marketing agency scene, right? But very quickly I realized that no, like I don't want to compete in a crowded market, right? There's bigger people in this space, right? Because they've been at it for longer, and they have an edge, right? So how can I find the edge? Like I'm not willing to, like I'm not gonna, as an entrepreneur, right? I wasn't gonna say I'm gonna take third, fourth place, right? I was like, no, let me create my own lane, and let me be the top person in that lane, right? And if that means I'll have less followers or less people that fuck with it, so be it, right? But at least having your specific lane. And so that's why I basically, instead of trying to like either battle it out and try to be the top person in this already crowded space, I was like, okay, let me actually shift towards something that I'm more passionate about, something that comes to me easier. And that was the e-com agency space, which no one was really talking about. It was like a vertical, right? Within the social media marketing agency space. And then as I dove deeper into it, I realized that it had incredible potential to even become larger than the social media marketing agency space, right? And so that's that. When I started a new business, whether it's my personal brand or my agency, like that's the way I approach things. I'm like, I always look for the blue ocean. Like, what is the space that comes to me, fairly easy, right? I'm playing in the space that I'm playing to my strengths, and also where I can be the top dog, right? And I can serve as many people and as well as possible.
Big points there. On the blue oceans, on the dominating your own space, and carving out and not competing with others.
It's just not worth it. Like competition is just annoying. Like I'm not saying there's not a space for competition, but you see this all the time as well. I think entrepreneurs, and again, everything that we speak about, we've gone through, right? Like when I say like other people have, I tend to include myself in it as well, right? But I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs find an ego boost from competing with someone, right? For like the same market share or whatever. And I think there is a place and time for that. But I feel like sometimes it blinds entrepreneurs from saying, hey, like, let them have it. Let me look let me look at their blind spots, right? What are they missing? What can I attack? Instead of trying to beat them at their own game, right? Which you guys can go for it. You guys can go at it, right? You can, 30 years going at it, right? Instead of trying to do that and trying to beat them at their own game, why not find the blind spots and just tap into that? And when you start taking some time off and then kind of like realizing and reflecting, okay, what are some of the places I could tap into, right? What are some of my strengths and some of the things that they're not capitalizing on? Then all these spots, like they just become very clear, right? And you just like expose them one at a time. And before you know it, you've made more progress in 6 months than they have in like 3 years. And I think, that's kind of the way I approach business all the time, is like, instead of competing and going at it, like for the same piece of bread, right? Like just find a different angle, flip it on its head, like find a different spot, a blind spot, where they don't even see it coming. And then boom, you're like literally on the same spot or head.
No, big points there, in terms of, finding your own space, creating space for yourself, tapping into the blue ocean. Really, like as you said, there is that quote, competition's for losers, right? And you're trying to carve out your own space and being able to serve people and be the best at what you're doing within there, right? And as you said as well, you can try to copy someone for as much as you want, but you're never really going to be able to beat the OGs at their own game. Yeah. You have to be creating your own one and innovating and breaking new barriers from that. Dude,
I think comparing it to sport, I think like boxing and MMA, like it's literally a great embodiment of this concept, which is like they never try to beat their competitor at their own game. They always try to expose their weaknesses, right? And that's why, for example, people realize that McGregor was great with his hands, but like he wasn't great on his feet or grappling, right? And so that's how he started losing, right? And people started beating him. The same thing with boxing. Like most of the knockouts are very calculated moves, right? Some of them are like they're not really, they wait for the other person to come in and then boom, jab, right? And I feel like, you know, it has a certain like nobility to it, and it compares well, right? Because it's business. It's not about who throws the most punches sometimes, or who hits harder. It's like, it's just very calculated. You look at, you know, their weakness, like you just kind of like Mayweather, like he doesn't really engage, but he's like the most successful boxer of all time because he's so calculated. He just like, you know, takes the first 3 rounds to look at his opponent, literally diagnoses his opponent, exposes all weaknesses, right, and then he goes for the kill in a very calculated manner. So I think that's a really good comparison when it comes to like business in general.
And with that,
it's a wrap for another episode of The Art of E-commerce. We ended up talking about boxing.
covered a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, man. It comes to show that these are wide-ranging conversations. It's not just all going to be about e-commerce. I think it all relates back to it, right? It all relates back to business, and the way we do business nowadays is mainly through e-commerce, and that's what we're passionate about. But if we can talk about sales, pricing, and even boxing, we'll do it. So guys, if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't done so already, go ahead and smash the like button and hit the little bell icon so you never miss an update. Also, if you're listening on iTunes, or actually it's not in iTunes at this point, it's Apple Podcast or Spotify, go ahead and subscribe for more episodes. And with that being said, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Tony, and we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.